Anxiety flared over Israel like lightning ripping through the night. Hundreds of Iranian missiles, not one, not two, but 100, took to the air, crossed invisible red lines, and crashed down on a country that believed its Iron Dome would save it from any storm. But on this night, even the sky split in half. Explosions rang out over Tel Aviv, a capital where life thrived just yesterday. But today, craters mark the site of the Ministry of Defense. The streets of Jerusalem tremble, and in the western Negev, fire engulfs the horizon. People run to bomb shelters, and air raid sirens blare like a funeral march for an entire era, an era that didn't end today. It ended in 2018, with one signature, with one smirk, with one man. That man's name is Donald John Trump. The world forgot how he tore apart the nuclear deal with Iran, forgot how, in a live broadcast, he yanked the U.S. out of the agreement, tossed the papers into the trash bin of diplomacy, and announced to the world, "We're no longer playing by the rules." Back then, it looked like just another political show. But today, as Iran's missiles destroy targets in Israel, it's obvious. That act wasn't an episode. It was the beginning of a war. Trump always despised diplomacy. To him, a treaty was weakness. He believed the only language for speaking with enemies was the language of force. He didn't understand that strength could also lie in restraint, in balance, in IAEA inspections, in international obligations. He saw the Iran deal not as a tool for stability, but as Obama's legacy, something to destroy. And destroy it, he did, with joy, to applause. And now explosions thunder over Jerusalem. When the U.S. exited the nuclear deal, Iran was left alone, without guarantees, without inspections, without restraints. Tehran began accelerating uranium enrichment. It started developing long-range missiles, and all this under the noise of indifference from the White House. Because for Trump, preventing conflict wasn't the goal. Winning the media war was. A victory that today turns into real victims. Israel, seeing this stance, began acting more boldly. Planes took off, striking Iranian targets in Syria, Iraq, and Iran itself. Because the U.S. was silent. More than that, the U.S. cheered it on. Trump didn't just ignore the escalation, he encouraged it. He embraced Netanyahu, called Israel the shield of civilization, and simultaneously tore down the entire architecture of peace that held that shield together. Today, that shield is burning. The hundreds of missiles launched by Iran aren't madness. They aren't the sudden insanity of a regime. They are the result, the outcome. A mathematically calculated response to years of provocations. And if anyone seeks the guilty party, they need only open a photo archive and find the shot of Trump, with a smug smile, tearing up the document that kept Iran in check. And now analysts say Iran could produce 15 nuclear warheads in the coming days. Because Trump didn't just take away a piece of paper, he destroyed trust. Iran no longer believes in diplomacy. Israel no longer believes in restraint. And the world is caught between two nations, each ready to pull the trigger. Thousands are fleeing Tel Aviv. Airports are in chaos. The missile defense system is overloaded. Israel can't cope. The U.S. promises support. But where was that support when the deal needed to stay in place? Where was that shield when, in 2018, diplomacy was sold off to vanity? And Donald Trump? He posts sarcastic messages on his network. He writes, "I warned you." Warned. He provoked. He ignited. He built his campaign on destruction. And now, as buildings collapse, he smiles. Because in his logic, chaos is a convenient backdrop for a comeback. He wants to be the leader again. He wants to steer the nuclear briefcases again. But that briefcase could explode. Because the next wave of missiles might not carry just conventional warheads. Iran has made it clear, if the pressure continues, if the war doesn't stop, the response will be far more radical. And all this, by a script written in the White House in 2018. A script where tearing up treaties is applause, where fear is currency, where war is a tool for ratings. Today, Israel and Iran balance on the edge of total conflict. Someone might say, but Trump isn't in power anymore. True. But it was he who pulled the brick from the wall that held back this avalanche. He pulled the pin, left the grenade, and walked away. And today, as explosions roar, as cities burn, as children hide in basements, he says, "Wasn't I right?" No, he was the destroyer, the architect of instability, and if, in the coming hours, even one Iranian warhead is nuclear, he will be the man who opened the door to hell for this world. A door that can't be closed with memes, jokes, or election slogans. Across all of Israel, this isn't just an attack, it's the collapse of the entire architecture of regional security, and if anyone still thinks this crisis arose on its own, without an external catalyst, let them look toward Mar-a-Lago. Because, however terrifying and dramatic today's bombardment is, its roots are in Washington. More precisely, in one man. Donald John Trump. Today's reality is this. Air defense systems are overloaded. The Iron Dome emits an almost continuous siren. Missiles fly every few seconds, and not all are shot down. Pillars of fire rise over Tel Aviv, flashes reflecting in the glass facades of skyscrapers. According to military reports, one Iranian missile hit the headquarters of Israel's Ministry of Defense in Kiryat. There are wounded. The situation is unstable, and anxiety spreads across the country. Israeli families spend hours in shelters. This is war. Real war. But let's rewind. 6 years back. 2018. It was then, to please his toxic audience, that Trump exited the nuclear deal with Iran. This was a document crafted by the best minds of diplomacy. It controlled and limited Iran's nuclear program, allowed IAEA inspectors to monitor uranium enrichment, and close the path to warheads. But to Trump, that meant little. He didn't need stability. He needed a show. Instead of refining or strengthening the control mechanism, he simply uprooted the agreement. Without discussion, without a strategy, without allies' support. His motivation was simple, to show strength. But strength without wisdom is chaos. And Trump gave Tehran a signal. Deals with America are worthless. So why keep them? Iran saw Trump's decision as a direct threat. The Ayatollahs no longer felt bound. The chains of control fell off. Iran sped up its program. Centrifuges were restarted. Uranium enrichment resumed with new force. Hidden labs began working triple shifts. Investments flowed into ballistic missiles, drones, hypersonic carriers. All this, a direct consequence of America's rejection of dialogue. And what was Trump doing? Holding rallies, telling crowds how he whipped Iran. People in red caps shouted, "USA, USA," while, underground in Tehran, new missiles were built. When analysts warned that this policy would lead to escalation, they were called liberal hysterics. But now, missiles aren't falling in theory, they're hitting homes. In 2020, to push the situation into a dead end, Trump ordered the killing of General Qasem Soleimani, a key figure in Iran's military command. An act of aggression on foreign soil without congressional sanction. It wasn't a precision operation. It was a slap. Tehran responded then with restraint, but vowed revenge would come in time. Today, that time has arrived. Iran didn't forget, and it prepared. Because, from the moment the deal was torn up, It understood. The U.S. under Trump wasn't a partner, but a provocateur, and Israel, stripped of America's restraining influence, prepared for a preemptive strike. Both states began strategic saber-rattling, and today we see the result. Now, attention. The situation is slipping out of control. Israel is preparing a counterstrike on facilities in Natanz and Arak. These are nuclear sites. Hitting them isn't just destruction, it's a potential radiological catastrophe. Iran could see it as a declaration of total war. In turn, per Western intelligence, Iran is close to creating a nuclear arsenal. Some sources speak of 12-15 warheads. If these numbers are true, the world is on the brink of the most dangerous escalation since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Who's to blame for bringing us to the edge of this nuclear abyss? Who broke the control mechanisms? Who first said, "Burn it all"? The answer is obvious. Donald Trump. He didn't just exit the deal, he exited the very idea of diplomacy. He swapped negotiations for threats, control for bravado, international responsibility for a show for his voters. When today's news says, Iran attacked Israel, it should add, and one man started this chain. Not in Iran, not in Israel, but in the U.S., in the Oval Office, in 2018. If Iran does use tactical nuclear weapons, and analysts now allow for this possibility, the consequences will be monstrous. Tens of thousands of victims, catastrophic environmental impact, and it all began with one man deciding that international treaties got in the way of his tough guy image. This conflict isn't a fluke, it's not an escalation. It's the logical end of Trumpism in foreign policy. The finale of America First, where first means shirking responsibility for the world. And now we're all in the epicenter of what he once called a great deal. Tel Aviv is burning, literally. Smoke rises kilometers high over the coast. People run to the metro, not just for transport, but as shelter from metal shards and fire. Rescue services can't cope. The 101 line is overloaded, hundreds of calls a minute, and only busy tones on the other end. Healthcare is at its breaking point. This is happening in a country that spent years preparing for war, but no one was ready for this. And as politicians urgently discuss opening a green corridor for civilian evacuation, the international community sends its usual deep concern. Meanwhile, dozens of new drones take off from western Iran, the second salvo. Stop and ask yourself, how did we reach this line? How did a region, barely held by fragile control mechanisms, turn into an open war zone with the prospect of nuclear clash? The answer, again and again, leads to one man: Donald Trump. When Trump ripped up the nuclear deal in 2018, he didn't just make a political error, he committed a strategic crime. It wasn't mere diplomatic negligence, it was a demonstration. The U.S. no longer plays by the rules, so everyone else can forget the rules too. Iran took this signal literally. It wasn't just military modernization, it was ideological mobilization. The Shiite propaganda machine roared to life. The rhetoric changed. America was no longer just the great Satan, abstractly. Now it was the leader of lies, wordbreaker, the one who signed a deal and trampled it. For Iran's regime, this was the perfect excuse to justify aggression. And that aggression has been simmering for 6 years. We just didn't want to look. Inside Israel, the situation is critical. The threat of weapons of mass destruction isn't hypothetical. Israeli generals openly discuss a preemptive strike on Iran's nuclear sites. Tehran, per intelligence, has shifted parts of its nuclear infrastructure to combat mode. This means the path to the first nuclear use in the 21st century is open, and if it happens, let no one be shocked. Because the fire now consuming the Middle East started with one match, Trump's match. He exited an agreement backed by the UK, Germany, France, Russia, China. He did it alone, without consultation. He tore down a structure the world built over decades, and now we see how easily everything balanced on that collapses. As Israel mobilizes reservists and Iran posts videos of its missile salvos as propaganda, one man in American politics acts like nothing serious happened. Trump, if he mentions this war, uses it only to blame Biden. But not once has he admitted his guilt for starting this chaos. And the scariest part, even now, his followers, in Congress, in the media, repeat old lines about Obama's failure, Democrats' softness. But it was Trump who dismantled the only mechanism that worked. The world stands on the edge of a new nightmare. Nuclear war tech isn't a secret. If Iran launches even one warhead, if Israel responds, if Hezbollah joins from the north, if Saudi Arabia steps in, if the US gets dragged in, we'll be in a historic moment no one's ready for, all because one man wanted to play tough guy. This conflict isn't just Middle East contradictions, it's the result of abandoning responsibility. And the name of that irresponsibility is Donald Trump. Israel is enduring one of the most intense missile attacks in its history. Dozens of salvos, hundreds of missiles, many of them heavy ballistic Sagil 4 complexes, piercing the night sky, shattering silence, and exploding in densely populated areas. By morning, military estimates report over 300 munitions launched, including 30 kamikaze drones weaving among apartment buildings. The sky over Tel Aviv flickers with intermittent intercept flashes. Smoke rises in columns over Ashdod, turned to a crater after a missile hit an oil depot, and entire neighborhoods in Petah Tikva and Bat Yam are without power. The Iron Dome works, but it's failing, seen in collapsed homes, burning cars, and the eyes of women and children who know no one is safe today. Amid the ruins, evacuations continue in all cities. Israeli command has deployed reservists, declared mobilization. Women, men, draft-age retirees join air defense battalions and IDF bases. The military quietly repositions forces along the Lebanon and Syria borders, fearing a Hezbollah attack from any angle. But this is the crisis's outward face. Inside, panic, hysteria, protests. In Tel Aviv, psychological support lines are stormed. Thousands of calls from terrified people. Hundreds of psychologists work 24/7. Parents post desperate messages. We have a shelter at home, but the child still cries. We don't turn off the light so the kid doesn't think it's dark. This is a system turned to a non-binary choice, life or ash. Iranian generals are certain. If Israel doesn't stop, a new salvo is coming, this time heavier, with warhead-carrying drones and deep rear targets. The IDF vows a harsh and calculated response, but no real strikes have been launched. Everything's held under political and diplomatic deliberation, as not just lives, but the fate of a potentially nuclear war is at stake. Europe ramps up pressure. The EU demands an immediate ceasefire, sends new peacekeepers, discusses economic sanctions on Iran, promises humanitarian aid to Israel. At the UN Security Council, Russia and China oppose unilateral sanctions and urge both sides to restrain. The US, says it, supports Israel's right to self-defense and sends the carrier Eisenhower and several air defense destroyers to the region. But Washington hasn't announced direct force, only promises of cover and political support. And here's the key moment. This very morning at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump goes on camera saying, "The situation is due to Biden's weakness and woke policy. If I were president, Iran wouldn't dare. I proved it by exiting the deal. The world knew its place." His words flood feeds with likes. Followers discuss, Make Israel great again. This moment makes it clear. Trump keeps playing his game. But this isn't a show. It's an incendiary factor, destabilizing the region. Israel wouldn't have struck so sharply if there'd been even a chance of diplomacy. But Trump's policy destroyed all dialogue mechanisms. The Iran deal, IAEA inspections, compliance-based sanctions, all trashed for political gain. The world saw you can't deal with America, so the only language left is fire. Today's attack isn't just a response to an Israeli strike, it's a demonstration. Rules no longer apply. Iran acted because it saw the U.S. under Trump dismantle controls. Israel responds because it had no choice. And the whole world is in the bombing's epicenter. As air defenses overload and planes prepare for a counter, it's vital to grasp. This isn't just escalation. It's a new era's start. An era where treaties are paper and restraint is politicized, tied not to geopolitics, but to presidential performance. And when another missile rips the night sky, as the Prime Minister speaks to the nation from some bunker room, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Munich, they sign support statements. But the issue isn't those words. The issue is, this war stems from diplomacy's betrayal, a sellout of controls by an American president. And when the next salvo isn't just a dagger in a home, but a nuclear charge, Trump's name won't be forgotten. Because he started this chain, not with words, not with support words, but with the engine that released global restraints brakes. Now, as missiles still fly, as Israel's air defenses haven't stopped for 3 days, it's clear. This isn't just a strike exchange. It's the start of something irreversible. And more military analysts on CNN and Fox News, left and right, liberal and conservative, agree on one thing. We've reached the nuclear conflict line, maybe right up to it. Why? Because what we see isn't just revenge. It's the complete erosion of strategic boundaries. Israel is furious over the strike on the Ministry of Defense headquarters. The hit wasn't on a dual-use site, not an ammo depot, but on the political center of the nation's defense, in Tel Aviv, in its heart. It's a challenge. In response, Israel is considering a so-called demonstrative nuclear detonation in the desert as a final warning. Iran, per several Western intelligence reports, has raised the readiness of nuclear complexes in Fordo and Natanz, its enriched uranium stockpile, beyond permitted limits. They don't officially confirm, but no one pretends they don't know what's happening. And on this backdrop, Donald Trump, the former U.S. president, running his 2024 campaign amid a war he provoked. You ask, how? Simple. In 2018, Trump tore up the Iran nuclear deal, a deal the whole world supported, a deal that somewhat controlled Iran's nuclear program, a deal that let IAEA inspectors access sites, and most importantly, a deal that worked. And Trump tore it up unilaterally, without consultation, without a plan B, just for cheap rally applause. Now the result, Iran, with uranium in hand, with ready delivery systems, with motivation. Because it feels betrayed, because it was shown deals with the U.S. aren't worth the paper. Everything happening today is the logical consequence of that destructive policy. And the more Trump brags, if I were president, this wouldn't have happened, the clearer it is. He's the one who started it all. He dismantled trust. He opened the door to radicals. He showed international treaties can be ignored. He inspired Iran to build the bomb. He signaled to Israel that America's no longer a mediator, but a provocateur. And now, it can't be stopped. And now, the scariest part. Even if Israel strikes back and Iran responds again, even if both sides exhaust each other to ash, the nuclear scenario no longer seems impossible. It's part of public discourse. CNN discusses blast radius for a detonation in the Negev desert. German headlines: How Europe Prepares for a Nuclear Wave. Japan debates secondary effects. These are signs that nuclear escalation is possible, expected, and, worst of all, normalized. And for this, Donald Trump bears direct responsibility. If a nuclear warhead explodes over Tehran today, he'll stay silent. If Israel conducts a demonstrative blast in the Negev desert, he'll say, "I'd have done it better." But the truth is, he did it first. Not in the desert, but in Washington, in the Oval Office, when he tore up papers, trampled trust, and started the countdown to global catastrophe. This conflict is no longer local. It's already drawn in the U.S., through its alliance with Israel. It's drawn in Russia and China, through the UN Security Council. It's affecting oil prices, the dollar's rate, panic sell-offs on markets. It's making our world one of anxiety, fear, and nuclear paralysis. And if tomorrow's screens flash, "Strike delivered," let no one ask, why? Just remember, the name of the man who started it all, Donald John Trump. It's early morning in Israel now. Smoke still hangs over Tel Aviv. Fire pumps hum, field hospital generators rumble. But the main feeling isn't exhaustion or even fear. It's the anxious anticipation that a second, even heavier wave could hit any minute. On IDF command screens, red scatters of targets. Iranian Sajils and Ahmad-3s stand in silos in northern and western Iran, while mobile Zulfagar launchers move to positions in Kermanshah and Khuzestan provinces. Radio intercepts confirm Tehran is preparing a synchronized salvo to overload Israel's missile defense for good. Israeli military knows the Iron Dome and David Sling resources aren't infinite. In 3 days, they've fired over 1,500 interceptors, a pace even Israel's strong economy can't sustain. The General Staff orders urgent redeployment of Patriot batteries from southern districts, but that takes hours they may not have. For the first time in years, evacuating children from the central cluster, Tel Aviv, Rishon LeZion, Netanya, to the north, toward the Golan, where direct hits are less likely, is seriously discussed. Meanwhile, the narrow military cabinet decides how to respond. 3 options on the table. First, a massive airstrike on 2 Iranian air bases near Hamadan and Isfahan. It'd give Israel a media strength image, but won't stop missile silos. Second, decapitation of key command centers in Tehran. A risky operation requiring F-35s to fly through Iran's air defense umbrella. Third, the most ominous, a strike with deep penetrating GBU-57 bombs on underground nuclear complexes in Natanz and Fordo. Israeli press admits this scenario would shift the conflict from conventional to potentially atomic. Concurrently, the U.S. announces deployment of an Aegis missile defense ship group in the eastern Mediterranean. The Pentagon stresses, any missiles threatening our forces or allies will be shot down. But threat to allies is vague. 1 or 2 errant trajectories, and U.S. destroyers enter combat, officially pulling Washington into the war. At the same hour, the State Department says, the U.S. doesn't seek escalation, but will support Israel. Europe's in panic. Oil prices crossed $190. Gas futures jumped 40%. The European Commission prepares an energy emergency plan. Moscow and Beijing called an emergency UN Security Council meeting, but an immediate ceasefire resolution is stuck on wording. China demands a clause for immediate JCPOA revival. The U.S. blocks amendments blaming one side. In diplomatic corridors, they recall 2018. We were cut out of the equation with one Trump signature. Now we're cleaning up. Meanwhile, in Iran, the mirror image. Qom fills with trucks carrying Cordad 15 air defenses. Approaches to Karaj and Arak facilities are blocked by army cordons. State TV loops footage of depots where mobile launchers deliver new Zulfikar Basir missiles. Officials repeat, the next strike will be stronger if the Zionist regime doesn't stop aggression. But off-record remarks leak. They opened the door when they tore up JCPOA. Now that door shuts only after nuclear parity. And here's the pivotal moment. If Tehran can indeed assemble up to 15 tactical nuclear warheads in days, and Western intelligence doesn't rule out critical uranium amounts ready, what would an Israeli strike on Natanz lead to? A direct, unrestrained response, meaning the first nuclear exchange in the Middle East. Does this mean the button will be pressed? It depends on whether, in the next 48 hours, some dialogue channel can be restored. But the main negotiator who broke the old channel is Donald Trump, and he's not in the administration today. He's campaigning, blaming Biden for weakness. Not a word about how he, Trump, killed the IAEA inspection regime, spurred Tehran to accelerate, and stripped Israel of a diplomatic fuse. Every new explosion over Israel is a visual marker of that history page where Trump yanked the safety. Worst deal, in the trash. Today, that trash bin has burned into a fiery crater, sucking in the whole region. And if, in the coming days, the world sees nuclear mushroom clouds, the epitaph for this catastrophe will start with the name of the man who, for electoral hype, redrew global security. Israel's citizens sit in shelters, Iran's citizens by TV screens, Europe and the US nervously watch reports, and Trump posts another message. This all happened because of Biden. No, Donald. It happened because you once decided the world is a reality show where paper deals are boring and explosions boost ratings. Now the explosions are real. And so are the stakes.